Her father offers half the kingdom to anyone who can break the curse, but every prince who tries flees in terror of her appearance. They say her skin is made of iron scales so sharp they can slice through bone. But what if the real curse wasn't on her body, but on the hearts of those who looked at her? This is the story of Princess Efua, the Iron Princess of Oyo, and the humble man who saw what no warrior could. Before I begin, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell. Long ago, in the ancient Kingdom of Oyo, there lived a king whose greed knew no bounds. His name was King Adebayo, and he ruled over golden fields, vast forests, and rivers that sparkled like jewels under the sun. But all this wealth was not enough for him. One year, the earth spirit Mawu-Lisa appeared to the king in the sacred grove. The spirit's voice was like thunder rolling across the sky. King Adebayo, you have taken more from the earth than you have given. You have broken the pact that has protected your lineage for 1,000 generations. The king laughed. I am king of Oyo. The earth exists to serve me, not the other way around. Mawu-Lisa's eyes glowed like molten copper. Then let your bloodline wear the weight of your greed. The next child born to your house will carry the burden of your broken promises. 3 moons later, Queen Amara gave birth to a daughter. The midwives gasped and dropped their instruments. The baby's skin was not soft and warm. It was cold, hard, and covered in scales of iron that glinted like 1,000 tiny blades. The queen wept. The king turned away. They named her Efua, which means, born on a Friday, a day of both Venus and hardship. As Efua grew, so did her curse. She was beautiful in face and form, with eyes like pools of honey and a voice that could make birds stop singing. But no one could touch her. Her iron scales were razor sharp. Even her mother could not hold her without bleeding. The king built her a tower at the edge of the palace grounds. Not a tower of stone, but of soft wood, padded with cloth, so that when Efua moved, she would not damage the walls. It became her prison. The servants called her the Iron Princess. Children whispered stories about the monster in the wooden tower. And every night, Efua stood at her window and cried tears that froze on her iron cheeks, making the scales grow thicker, heavier, colder. By the time Efua reached her 16th year, King Adebayo's guilt had transformed into desperation. He sent messengers across the continent announcing a challenge: any man who could break the curse would receive half the kingdom and Efua's hand in marriage. They came in waves. Warriors struck at her scales with blessed swords and sacred hammers. But every blade shattered. Every hammer cracked. And Efua sat still through it all, her heart growing colder with each failed attempt, because not one of them looked her in the eyes. Not one asked her name. To them, she was not a person. She was a problem to be solved, a treasure to be won. Then came the sorcerers with their chants and smoke. They threw powders and drew symbols in the air. But the iron remained. Finally came the princes, men dressed in silk and gold, who believed their royal blood alone would break the spell. But when they saw Efua up close, when they heard the scrape of metal against metal as she moved, when they touched a single scale and felt their fingers split open, they ran. One prince told the king, "I would rather marry a crocodile." Efua heard these words. She heard all the words. And with each rejection, the iron scales spread further, until even her voice began to sound hollow and metallic. She stopped going to her window. She stopped singing. The tower became silent as a tomb. Perhaps, she whispered one night, I am not meant to be loved. Perhaps I will carry my father's sin until I turn completely to iron and become a statue in this wooden cage. It was on a day like any other, when hope had dried up like a riverbed in drought, that Jelani arrived in Oyo. Jelani was not a warrior or a sorcerer or a prince. He was a palm wine tapper, a man who climbed trees each morning to collect sweet sap. His hands were rough from rope and bark. His clothes were simple. But his smile was warm, and his eyes held a kindness that seemed out of place in a world grown so hard. He had traveled for many weeks to reach Oyo, guided by a dream. In this dream, a woman made of starlight stood weeping in a tower of thorns, and a voice told him, she does not need to be broken. She needs to be seen. When Jelani reached the palace, the guards laughed at him. Go home, tree climber. This is a challenge for real men. But Jelani was patient. He walked past the guards, past the courtyard where broken swords lay rusting, and stopped at the base of Efua's tower. He did not call out or demand entry. Instead, he sat down, took a small drum from his bag, and began to play. The rhythm was simple. A heartbeat. Steady and warm. Dum-dum. 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 Inside the tower, Efua heard it. At first, she thought it was another trick. But the sound continued, hour after hour, without demand or expectation. Just the rhythm of a heart, patient and true. On the second day, Jelani began to speak between the beats of his drum. Good morning, princess. The sun is very beautiful today. It makes the leaves look like they are covered in gold dust. Efua did not respond, but she moved closer to the window. On the third day, Efua finally spoke. Her voice was raw from disuse, like iron scraping against iron. Why are you here? Jelani smiled. Because I had a dream that you were waiting for someone who would not try to change you. I am cursed. You are covered in iron, yes. But iron is not who you are. It is only what fear has made you wear. Efua's scales hummed, a strange vibration she had never felt before. It was almost like music. Everyone who has come here wants to break me, she said. I do not want to break you. I want to know you. What is your favorite time of day? No one had ever asked her such a question. Dawn, she whispered. When the world is soft and quiet. Mine too, Jelani said. Each day, he returned. He told her stories about villages he had visited, about children who climbed trees to steal mangoes. He never asked about the curse. He never stared at her scales. He simply shared his word with her, as if she were not a monster in a tower, but a friend on the other side of a door. And slowly, impossibly, Efua began to change. Not her body, but her heart. She laughed at Jelani's jokes. She shared her own stories. She sang for him, and though her voice rang metallic and strange, Jelani listened as if it were the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. You have a gift, he told her. Your voice carries strength. One evening, Efua pressed her hand against the wooden wall, wishing she could reach through and touch the man who had given her back her humanity. Jelani, you have done more for me than all the warriors and princes combined. But the curse remains. I am still iron. I am still untouchable. Then we will find another way, he said. But fate was about to force their hands. A great coldness descended upon Oyo. It came without warning, a spiritual frost that turned rivers to ice and killed the crops. The elders consulted the old text and discovered this was a judgment from Mawu-Lisa, a reminder that the king's debt remained unpaid. To stop the frost, a sacrificial fire had to be lit at the ancient altar in the sacred grove. But the fire could only be started with a sacred flame, and that flame could only be carried by someone of royal blood. King Adebayo was summoned. But when he saw the path through the snow, when he realized he would have to face the earth spirit he had once mocked, his courage failed him. Send my daughter, he said, his voice shaking. Efua emerged from her tower for the first time in years, her iron scales glinting in the cold light. The people gasped and backed away. I will go, she said. If my father's greed caused this curse, then perhaps my sacrifice can end it. Jelani stepped forward. You cannot walk through the snow alone. The cold will freeze the joints in your iron skin. Then what do you suggest? the king demanded. Jelani looked at Efua, and she looked back at him. I will carry her, Jelani said. The crowd erupted in protest. You will be cut to ribbons. I know, Jelani said simply. But she is not a burden. She is a light bearer. And I am strong enough to hold her. Efua shook her head, tears streaming down her iron cheeks. Jelani, no. I cannot let you hurt yourself for me. He stepped closer. Efua, you have been hurting for years, and you have carried it alone. Let me carry you. Just this once. Before she could protest again, he lifted her in his arms. The moment his skin touched her scales, blood began to flow. The iron cut into his palms, his arms, his chest. But Jelani did not flinch. He simply began to walk. The journey through the frozen forest was agony. With each step, Efua's scales dug deeper into Jelani's flesh. Efua wept. Put me down. Please. You are dying for me. No, Jelani whispered, his voice strained but steady. I am living for you. There is a difference. Why? She sobbed. Why would you do this? He looked down at her, his eyes filled with pain and something deeper, something unshakable. Because when I look at you, I do not see iron. I see a woman who sings at dawn. I see someone who has carried an impossible weight and still found the strength to care for others. Your weight is nothing compared to the light you carry inside. At that moment, something shifted. The iron scales began to glow, first red like heated metal, then orange, then white hot. Efua screamed, terrified. But Jelani held on. The iron did not shatter. Instead, it melted. It flowed like liquid gold across her body, beautiful and bright, and then it evaporated into mist that rose into the cold air like a prayer being answered. Where the iron had been, soft human skin emerged, warm and unmarked. Jelani collapsed to his knees, still holding her, his blood staining the snow. But he was smiling. Efua touched her own arms, her face, her hands. The iron was gone. She was free. She looked at Jelani, at the wounds covering his body, and she understood. The curse had never been about her skin. It had been about her heart, about believing she was unlovable. And it was broken not by violence or magic, but by someone who loved her enough to bleed for her, and by her own realization that she was worth that love. She pressed her hands, her soft, human hands, to Jelani's wounds, and where she touched, the cuts closed. Together, they walked the final steps to the altar. Efua lit the sacred fire, and the warmth spread across Oyo, melting the frost, bringing life back to the land. King Adebayo fell to his knees before his daughter. Forgive me. I condemned you to carry my punishment. Efua looked at her father, and though the anger was still there, so was compassion. The curse is broken, Father. Let us not build a new one with bitterness. In time, Efua and Jelani were married. They traveled the kingdom, listening to the people, healing wounds both seen and unseen. They say that wherever Efua walked, plants grew stronger. That her touch could ease pain. That the iron that had once been her curse had been transformed into a heart of gold. And Jelani became known as the drum heart, the man whose rhythm had called a soul back from the edge of turning to stone. Sometimes the armor we wear to protect ourselves becomes the very thing that isolates us. The iron was never Efua's true curse. Her true curse was believing she had to carry it alone.
Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories. See you next time.